Good afternoon, everyone. This is Mark Skidmore from the North Central Regional Center for Rural Development. Thanks for joining us for this webinar. Today we have the last webinar in a series on placemaking, and you can find the other webinars on our website. So this has been a great opportunity for cross-state learning. The series was actually born out of a discussion that Kurt Schindler, one of the presenters today, and I had about placemaking, and he was thinking about sharing some of the Michigan tools for placemaking and approaches, and that sort of developed into the idea of doing a whole series. So here we are at the end of our series, and we have Kurt Schindler and Mark Wycoff presenting Placemaking Michigan, Placemaking as an Economic Development Tool. Kurt is an MSU Extension Distinguished Senior Educator in Government and Public Policy for the western and northwestern parts of Michigan and in the Lower Peninsula. And Mark Wycoff serves as the Senior Associate Director of the Land Policy Institute and is Director of the Planning and Zoning Center. He's currently a community planner with 39 years of experience and is a fellow of the American Institute of Certified Planners. And both are my friends, and I have worked with them closely. So thanks again, Kurt and Mark, for putting together this presentation. Really looking forward to it. Thanks for all the others joining in. Some of you know that if you have a question, you can just type it into the chat section right on your screen there. And then Kurt and Mark, you can take those questions as they come or wait until the end, whatever seems best to you. So I'll hand it over to both of you now.
Thanks very much, Dr. Skidmore. We really appreciate the opportunity to share an hour here with colleagues in other parts of the country. I'm going to put you on a bit of a fast-moving horse here and walk you through a series, half a series of slides, and then turn it over to Kurt. We may handle some questions as we go, but probably will leave most of them to the end. All of the material you'll see here will be posted along with a longer version of this PowerPoint, which will have some more explanatory material. As Dr. Skidmore mentioned, we're going to be talking about placemaking as an economic development tool. That's very much our focus, but for those of you who are familiar with placemaking, you'll see that all of the traditional things are also incorporated. This shows you some of the other folks who are involved in helping us with not only this presentation, but a lot of the work that we've been engaged in. That list could be a whole lot longer. Our contact information is presented. We'd be happy to handle any questions that you might have by email. And also, if you have additional information on particularly getting the guidebook, we'll provide that to you and have that posted along with the presentation. Today we're going to look at these 5 topics: a description and history of the MiPlace Partnership Initiative, which is really the larger umbrella for this work. We'll talk a little bit about placemaking. Kurt's going to go into the curriculum and the guidebook, and a little bit on rural placemaking, which is not typically where most placemaking activities occur. We're effectively giving you a case study from Michigan. And we believe that the work that we've been engaged in the last 5 years here is very highly reproducible in other states. A lot of the materials we've presented probably don't have to be significantly adapted to be used elsewhere, but you're going to need a lot of local examples. We're going to tell you a little bit about why it was needed, what happened, how it evolved, what is produced, and hopefully, if we get time, how it's been institutionalized in state government and a variety of stakeholder organizations. And really became pretty clear as we got into this that the reason that we focused on placemaking as an economic development tool was really driven by economic circumstances, but in the end it's about changing attitudes and mindsets. We believe we've made some real progress that way. It was done without new legislation, and it has in fact changed the way that people think about economic development in Michigan. We think that's possible in your states as well. Now, the MiPlace Partnership Initiative is the umbrella, but there is a website. It's actually getting a little old and badly in need of updating right now, called MiPlace.org. There's a contract RFP out right now to do that, so hopefully by the end of the year it'll be a lot more refreshed. But there's an enormous amount of information even today that relates to placemaking and the work that we've done, and I would encourage you to go there if you want to see more. So what was the unique historic context that really got us into this in Michigan? Well, our unique situation has pretty much been shared by the Midwest, but a couple things are a little different. We actually are the only state in the country that made it through an entire decade and lost population. That's pretty hard to do over a 10-year period, especially since and then managed to lose all of them and 50,000 more in the last 5. And it's because the economic downturn was so bad in this state. We lost 860,000 jobs between 2000 and 2009. That's more jobs than any state has ever lost in that period of time. Nearly 20% of the jobs in the state were lost. And unfortunately, a large portion of those were manufacturing jobs, high-paying jobs. That, of course, ballooned our unemployment to 14.2% in August of 2009 compared to the nation's in 9.6%. And it's a long way of saying that it became evident that we had to start doing things significantly differently. We had to look at where we were in the world, and we had to examine with a more objective set of eyes that the old economy, which we were founded on, had dramatically changed, and we were in the midst of a new economy that everyone else was adapting to, but we were far behind. These next 2 slides show you the old and the new economy, and the key features of them that really explain to a very great degree what's been happening and why. The boxes on the right-hand side that are shaded in green are the ones that are most important because they relate to placemaking and the economic development dimension thereof. It used to be that an inexpensive place to do business was key, but now being rich in talent and ideas is key. It used to be attracting companies was what you focused your attention on. And now if you don't attract a large number of educated people, you're going to have a hard time being competitive. It used to be that it was a luxury to have a high-quality physical environment. Now you can't attract and keep those educated people if you don't have good physical and cultural amenities. Those are very, very critical things, as is the dimension of how people look for and move relative to jobs. It used to be that people followed jobs. That talented, well-educated people chose location first. Now people, or it used to be that you followed jobs and now they look for location first. And when I say location, this is not just any location. This has to be a location with a lot of amenities. It used to be that you had to have good transportation, raw materials. Now these high-quality places are critical. And you used to be able to get away with a poor quality environment, and now you better be clean, green, and have proximity to open space. Because that's what the talented workers of today require. And talent is, in fact, the currency of the new economy. And if you're not focusing on talent attraction and retention, then you can't be very effective in a world economy, a global economy. When we say talented workers, we're referring to not just the millennials. Of course, they are the principal target because they're young, they're well educated generally, and they're cheap as far as workers go. But there's a lot of knowledge workers, and many of those are older, and some are folks that took early retirement. You have lots of artists and creatives and entrepreneurs. They can be of any age. They're often immigrants. These are all talented workers, and these are all among those that we're targeting. As we got into this particular initiative, in fact, we were a couple of years into it with a 40-member stakeholder organization comprised of organizations around the state. we began to realize that there were three pillars that were of most critical importance. And these you see illustrated here. And what you've got is the first one in the upper left, business needs talent. But it's not just any workers, it's talented workers. Typically every day at lunch I read a different business magazine from a different region of the state, and story after story after story for the last several years is how in that particular business they can't find enough talented workers. And I continue to be amazed at how challenging that is across the board. But talented workers want quality places. But they don't want just any place. These have to be places with the kinds of cultural amenities that they want, because talented workers are mobile. They can effectively move anywhere they want to, and increasingly they do. And third, place needs business. But it doesn't just need one type. We have to have a diversified range of businesses, because that gives you your broadest range of job and wage opportunities. So we've built an awful lot of what we do around this message. Our governor frequently cites these three pillars of the key relationship of business to talent to place as a part of what we're doing. And we understand that we have to do better in terms of business, but we have discovered that if we don't improve the quality of place first, it's going to be very hard to get the kind of results that we want. The conversation that led to this initiative actually began back in 2006 between the Michigan Municipal League and the Michigan State Housing Development Authority, and that led to the creation of what's called the Sense of Place Council. That council now has more than 40 organizations that are involved, and they are incredibly broad in terms of their membership. They range everywhere from the Office of the Governor to architects to economic development organizations, Habitat for Humanity, planning organizations, realtors, small business organizations, historic preservation, local government organizations in the state, state agencies. It's a really very broad range of folks that are involved. Eventually what happened was that organization said, you know, now that we better understand what's going on, we need to get involved in trying to fashion an initiative that educates people about the new economy and about improving quality of place. Because place matters. It matters not only to those who live there, but also to those that you're trying to attract. And MISHDA, the State Housing Development Authority, hired us at the Land Policy Institute, as well as the Michigan Municipal League, to carry forward with 4 years of large contracts to design first a curriculum, then to execute it. We've trained over 15,000 people in that curriculum, then to build a guidebook around it, and then finally to refine how we measure progress and success, and to actually start putting on the ground placemaking projects built on these principles. MML has done that in conjunction with students and faculty in the School of Planning, Design, and Construction here at Michigan State University. I'm sure you can't read this particular slide. I gave you some of the key Sense of Place Council members already. You'll be able to see that in the handouts available after today's program. I can't overestimate, though, or explain the importance of the broad initiative involved in supporting us in these placemaking efforts. When Land Policy Institute reached out to Extension and drew in 3 of their educators to be co-authors of the curriculum and the guidebook with us, none of us really knew how much work that was going to be. The curriculum ended out to be 8 modules and over 36 hours of instruction. The guidebook is over 600 pages, which really converts the curriculum into words and pictures and lots of examples. But it's designed to be used very easily by those who have particular questions, fairly easy to find. You'll see examples of that coming up. But when we did the first draft of it, we submitted the draft to 70 members of the Sense of Place Council for review and comment. That was somewhat torturous to go back through all the comments that we received, and certainly very time consuming, but incredibly valuable as it helped us to hone our messaging. I'm going to give you just a really quick glimpse of placemaking, and in particular the focus that's involved in what we're doing from an economic development standpoint, and some of the key types that are involved in placemaking. The definition that we use is the process of creating quality places where people want to live, work, play, shop, learn, or visit. And you see examples here from around our state showing various aspects of what's involved in the physical development of placemaking, as well as the activities side of it, which is equally important, as is the land use side, which is oftentimes forgotten. These quality places that we're targeting to create have to be walkable and bikeable. They need to be pedestrian oriented. In urban places, there need to be mixed uses. They need to be very transportation friendly and full of housing options. This is one of the things that Michigan in particular, and the Midwest in general, is especially delinquent in, and very far behind other markets around the country. We've done a lot of work in this particular arena, in no small measure because of the support of the Michigan State Housing Development Authority. Quality places have good form, function, and social opportunity. You can't have, by our definition, a quality place unless it has all three of those. And by good form, that means that if you're in an urban place, that the characteristics of that form have to support walkability, pedestrianism. They have to support a large amount of business activity, as well as recreational and social activity. So those functions are carried out through a variety of land uses, and the nature and type of the form in those land uses is critical as well. If you don't have streets and sidewalks that are walkable with lots of street furniture and visually attractive, and no breaks and intersections, if you don't have farm markets that help bring quality food into places that may not easily be able to access it. On the right-hand side, you see in downtown Detroit as a part of Campus Martius, which is an incredible public space. A small part of that space in the summer is actually imported sand, and it's a beach activity. It adds not only an additional sense of fun and activity, but significantly improves the sense of place in that particular location. But it's a lot more than just existing downtowns. A large part of our focus has been on how placemaking can be used to transform a place which is pretty much lacking in any quality characteristics of a place into one that people want to be in and enjoy. This particular series of 3 slides by Steve Price, an incredible illustrator with Urban Advantage, shows you how you can take a very auto-oriented strip mall area. There's not even a curb with curb cuts here. It's just one big open area. A lot of pavement, not friendly to pedestrians at all. But that can be transformed in a phased process. Here you see simply by adding curbs, landscaping, street lights, and then making some alterations to better define the lanes in the center of the street, adding on-street parking. You've taken a very important step to trying to make a place a desirable one where people want to be, where they want to live, work, play, shop, learn, or visit. But you can, of course, do much more than that. In this particular example, we've carried it the next step, where we've built new dwellings on top of businesses at street level. You've now got a very enjoyable, walkable pedestrian sidewalk with human-scale lighting. You've got clearly delineated parking in a center turn lane that is reduced because you've taken the large number of lanes and reduced the number of lanes. You've got slower traffic, more inviting for the bicyclists as well as the pedestrians. All of this is a part of placemaking as an economic development tool. And our tool focuses not only on the large urban centers, the small downtowns, but also in some rural places and definitely the suburbs as well. So that's an overview, a quick overview of the initiative that we've been engaged in. I should mention that our initial opening came from a new governor who came into politics without any previous political background, and in his first 4 written addresses to the legislature, he singled out placemaking as critical to talent attraction and retention. And that really led to the creation of, internally within state government, an entity that had representation from 8 major state agencies that thereafter has met almost every month, and we've had well over 1,000 state employees trained on placemaking as an economic development tool across a wide range of agencies, including the Department of Environmental Quality, Natural Resources, and Transportation, and the like. And some of the amazing things is that some of the folks that have been the strongest advocates within their own organizations have been folks who you wouldn't expect to have had any interest in placemaking at all. By having the governor continue to raise placemaking after a year without very much comment. He raised it again in his State of the State 2 weeks ago and focused once again on the need for talent attraction. And as he's done repeatedly, he mentioned the importance of continuing to attract immigrants to Michigan, whether they're refugees or otherwise. They provide a tremendous amount of improvement to the diversity in the state, oftentimes are responsible for the creation of new businesses and the like. So with that as a background at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Kurt, who's going to carry you into the curriculum.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate that a great deal. For those of you that want to follow or learn more about LPI, Land Policy Institute at MSU, I've put into the chat box a link to that organization, and you can follow up with that as you have time in the future. So I want to talk about the overview of placemaking and the curriculum that we have developed or that we have in place now. And so it is all of these modules, 6 of them. And the first one is, I'm not going to read this. You can read what it talks about as you go through it. But the first one is focusing on people, places, and placemaking. The next module focuses on the economics of place and talks in large part how we're tying that back to an economic development strategy. The third one talks about neighborhoods, streets, and connections, the urban form, really sort of the short course on urban form for individuals to learn this. And the fourth one talks about form, planning, and regulation. So how you would incorporate that into master plans and those sorts of documents. The fifth one is public involvement and engagement. So whether we're talking about charrettes or some other forms of public involvement, how you bring the community forward with consensus to do those sorts of things. And then the sixth one is strategic growth process. And really it comes down to applied placemaking, what the tools are, where the funding sources are. And all of those combined is what gives us what we're trying to say in Michigan is prosperity. And so that's ultimately the goal that we're trying to work for. Now, each of these forms, each of these parts of the curriculum are really trying to implement the logic model, if you will, as we've outlined on this slide. So it's also important to understand not every community needs the same amount of detail or needs to be exposed to each of the 6 parts. And so for each of these classes, we have a 1-hour version. That might be the quick refresher, or the intended audience might be policymakers, elected officials. And then each one of these, we have a 2 to 3 hour version. And the intended audience there might be the local appointed planning commission members, the individuals who might be authoring the master plan or overseeing the authoring of the master plan and ordinances. And then each one of these has a 5 or 5+ hour version, which is an intended audience of practitioners and staff, those that are out in the mud doing the day-to-day work to make this happen. And so you can mix and match any combination of the 1 hour, the 2 to 3 hour, or the 5 hour, and provide a community with just the 1 or 2 that they need, or a combination of the details that they might need or want. And you have in the handouts you can download this table, which is full-size sheet, and it outlines for you each of the different versions, the different levels of detail, and how you're able to mix and match. So a lot of different ways, and I think that's one of the strengths of this program is our understanding that you don't put a program together like this with the thought that every community needs to hear this, so that each community is getting what it is that their weaknesses are in terms of education, and maybe simply a refresher on some of the things that they're already strong on. So that's the curriculum that's available as a face-to-face classroom type of approach. It's an extension program or a lot of other trained trainers from the MiPlace initiative. So, the ability to deliver this far exceeds our extension system's capacity to deliver. So we've done a lot of train the trainers so that we have individuals from the Michigan Municipal League and from all of those other partner organizations that could also be trainers for providing this program in communities throughout the state as it's needed, as that community decides that they have a need and a desire to start to pursue this. The next aspect of this curriculum that's really going to be very easy for you to get your hands on and to use is the Placemaking Guidebook. You can think of this as a textbook that is available for both communities in the state and for others anywhere else. Very comprehensive textbook. I've just put the link into the chat box so that you're seeing on the slide, so you can go to the link for a download of this. And you're basically going to be getting agreeing that your version of this book in a PDF format is only yours, isn't going to be shared with others, and that sort of thing. But let's go through the content of this textbook just very briefly so that you can get a feel for what is in here. So the book comes in 4 parts. The color coding on this slide is important. It'll correspond to the slides in the future programs. So the first part, well, that didn't work. Okay. The first part is an example from chapter 1, and it's the focus on placemaking as a tool for creating quality places. And so you can see the kind of illustrations and explanation that is in the book. It's talking about placemaking as a supplement to existing economic activities, policies, and practices. And it's not placemaking isn't something that you do instead of economic strategies in the community or in place of. It's something that you're doing in addition to. Each chapter is heavily illustrated, as you're seeing here. Here's another example from chapter 1. It's a focus on placemaking as a tool for creating quality places. All of the chapters feature case studies like you're seeing here. This is the case study of that park in downtown Detroit that Mark alluded to earlier, Campus Marcus. Another approach to this is in part 2. And in part 2, here's an example about neighborhood structure. And the illustrations are showing you elements of form and how that's teamed with community infrastructure. Each chapter is heavily illustrated with sidebars on many of the topics, which is what you're seeing in the illustration here. In part 3, we have an example from chapter 7, which is planning for placemaking. And here we have tabular information that is about placemaking elements that might be in the master plan, putting in the master plan. And part 4 is these chapters and then a large number of appendices on definitions and acronyms, state agency assistance, and more. And on this slide, you're seeing, in part 4, a review of each type of placemaking. And this one's talking about creative placemaking. So we do break down different types of placemaking, whether it's strategic or creative or what have you, and so on. The curriculum that we just reviewed and the contents of the guidebook does have one shortcoming, and that's to talk about rural placemaking. And in rural placemaking, it's important to understand that as this illustration out of the guidebook shows, that there is a transect. And we have from a very urban environment to a very rural or even pristine natural environment. And so large number of communities in the state of Michigan are rural, and that is the traditional audience for extension, is our agricultural areas. And so we have an approach to rural placemaking that might start to look something like this. The map on the left side of the screen is where you're identifying rural assets. It might be a natural feature, it might be a glacial formation, it might be a known location of a rare and endangered species or historic sites, quite a long list of things. And then you plot those locations on the map. And so then what you're seeing on the right-hand side is we start to see that they're grouping together in certain ways, and so we can create districts or areas that have a number of those natural features. And so those become the places in the rural environment, if you will, that might be put forth as rural placemaking. So it may be a natural area at the northeast corner of the lake, or it may be a corridor along a major river. And so that corridor might have trails, and it may have other amenities, boat launches, canoeing opportunities that are all taking place along that corridor. And so the transportation, the connectivity is how do I connect that natural area that's on the northeast corner of the lake to the corridor that follows the river, and that then connects to number 1 up in the upper left-hand corner that might be a historic site. And one of the things that we've learned in economic development in Michigan is that there's a strong interdependency between rural and urban. Neither one can exist without the other. Part of a quality of environment isn't just the downtown and the features and parks and the form in the downtown, but also the ability to go and recreate in the nearby rural locations, or to find farm markets in those sorts of activities. So we talked about the description and the history of the MiPlace partnership, the genesis for the effort that we put together in this state. Mark covered for you a brief overview of placemaking, talked about the curriculum. The main point about the curriculum is how dynamic it is and how you can tailor it to different community needs and situations. Did a quick overview of the Placemaking Guidebook, the 13 chapters in 4 parts and its appendices, and then a quick rundown of how that incorporates into rural placemaking. I would like to end by showing you a list of the MSU Extension land use educators that we have in Michigan, and geographically how they're dispersed and where they are. When you download this PowerPoint, you certainly will have their emails. You can contact any one of them, including myself, if you wish to do so. So we want to say thank you, and we'll answer questions as they come in the chat box. I see that Mark has already typed an answer to one in. So,
thank you, Mark and Kurt. So the audience now has a chance to type in a few questions. We have some time for that. I see some questions being typed right now, so we'll just hang on for a moment. So there's our first question. Kurt and Mark, would you like to take it?
Yeah, I can take it. The slide that you saw on rural placemaking is a slide that comes out of a much larger program. One of my colleagues, Dean Solomon, in the northern part of the state, was the principal author of that, and he has far more material on that, far more educational resources that he has used, that he's presented at our statewide planning conference and in communities around the state. So sending me an email or directly to Dean Solomon, be glad to share that.
And I might add to that, Kurt briefly gave you an illustration of the Grand Rapids Transact, and that's really, really, really important to understand when you think about terms like urban placemaking and rural placemaking, because the term rural is got a variety of different meanings to different folks. So if you have a small town in the middle of farmland or forest land, that is an urban place according to the Transact. And the Transact that you see here, right downtown, this is downtown Grand Rapids, is where you've got the river and your highest density and your largest buildings. But as you move out across the Transact, your density, while it's higher closer to the center, will start to go down. You'll be into your suburban areas and then ultimately into your rural areas. But by the time you get to the next small town, basically you're back at the beginning, but not perhaps with tall buildings, but certainly higher density than anything that's around that. From a placemaking standpoint, from the standpoint of the Transact, a small town is an urban place that is in a rural area. So one of the things that we preach with regard to our placemaking activities, and Kurt mentioned the integration between the urban and rural places, is that you need high quality amenities, high quality opportunities, high quality range of land uses within the small towns in rural areas, but that you can also and should try and integrate the rural natural features, rural pathways and trails and so on, and recreation areas into and with your other small towns that are in the area.
While we're waiting for some other questions, I see a question from Ann here. I'm just going to put this webinar summary evaluation for people to fill out before they feel like they may need to leave. So that's available for you. So participants, you can complete that. We really appreciate your feedback. And then there's the question from Ann.
And Ann's question is probably one best for Mark to answer.
The answer to that question, Ann, is that you're going to find in the guidebook that there's one whole chapter that's dedicated to engagement of a variety of different publics in a variety of different ways. And then in part 4, depending on what type of placemaking that you're engaged in and what kind of time frames that you're trying to accomplish various goals in, that's going to drive the process that you use for engagement. We have not included, for example, sample meeting agendas because that's going to be driven by what it is you're trying to accomplish. But we have more than enough examples in there of really, really small sorts of activities as well as really gargantuan sorts of challenges that you could undertake. One of the processes that's incorporated in the guidebook in a lot of detail is related to charretting per the National Charrette Institute. And we would strongly encourage you, if you haven't been trained by the National Charrette Institute in that particular model and method of placemaking, that you take advantage of that opportunity. Michigan State University just incorporated the National Charrette Institute into the university, and so it is one of the services that, while it's been available nationally, is now going to be available nationally, but through MSU. And we hope that you'll take advantage of some of those opportunities that we'll be making available to extension folks around the country as well as to others in the years to come.
Well, okay, I don't see anybody else typing in here, so maybe this is a good spot to stop for the afternoon. Okay, we have time for one more question. I see Casey typing. She's asking if we can page back to the emails addresses. Okay, so there they are.
Yeah, they're not all on. Yeah, this gives most of them except Kurt's and mine, I think. So.
Actually, you were there, but there's our emails.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so thanks again, Kurt and Mark, for pulling together this presentation. I know there's a lot of material in this curriculum, and that this team worked very hard over a number of years to develop it, and I'm glad to be able to host the webinar and share it with others. So maybe that's a good spot to stop for now. There is another guidebook that's available that Steve Grabo is showing down in the chat here on placemaking in Wisconsin.
And I just tried that, and I got a page not found. So
I see several more people are typing here.
It may be because it's picking up after the ASPX that here.
Well,